cars, rally cars, circuit cars and saloons, a talent that would bring him international success and the honour of being called the fastest man in New Zealand. But really very fast also described Freeth's mind, his wit, his life, a man of remarkable energy and passion, a man whose thirst for challenges would never be quenched. When Rodger Freeth was killed in a rally accident 2 weeks ago, New Zealand lost not only one of its most accomplished sportsmen, but also one of its finest minds. As Janet McIntyre reports, Rodger Freeth died as he lived at high speed.
It was not enough to be good, he had to be the best.
Well, I think that's the end of
And then he'd go one better. Challenge after stomach-churning challenge. Freeth and Bourne, partners for 5 years.
Freeth, 50. Can we keep it on the road, or do you want me to drive?
He wasn't up to driving slow. He wanted to go flat. And he said at the start of the rally, I remember we were sitting in the park Primo ready to go over the start ramp. And he turned around to me and says, "You're not going to drive like a woman this time." I mean, that's not a sexist statement or anything, but he just, to him, he wanted me to go for it.
Why did he like driving so fast?
Not so much driving fast, but driving fast properly is what he wanted. And it came down to doing something that was difficult properly. I think his whole life revolved around that. He liked doing things that other people couldn't do, but he liked to do them properly. He wasn't into not doing them right.
But he could never have figured on the chance circumstances that stopped him at 39 years. The mementos of a man who loved life and lived it to the max. Few people were closer to him than his rally partner, Possum Bourne.
I need to say thank you to Rodger, because he was a good teammate. He was like a business partner, someone not to chuck ideas at because he understood what I was trying to do. But most of all, thank you for being my best friend.
There's no mistaking the confidence in their faces at the start of Rally Australia a fortnight ago. They were fresh from a victory in Indonesia, and here at stage 2, they were in the lead. Then on a straight stretch, their car left the wet road and hit a tree. Not a bad crash compared to some. Possum walked away without a scratch. Can you describe how the accident happened?
I mean, we just had a bump wrong on a jump, because the cars jump, you know, you've seen pictures of them jump, and it just jumped higher in the back than it should have, and came down and went a bit berserk, and I was fighting it, and unfortunately there was a tree really right on the edge of the road, and we hit it, and for some strange reason that we still don't 100% know, he was hurt bad enough that he lost his life.
When it happened, did it strike you as being a bad accident?
Not at all.
When did you realise it was?
Well, so whenever you have an accident, you stop. When the things all stopped, fizzled out, I was still in the belt, so I said, "You right, Rog?" And he said, "No." Just like that and that. That's when I knew something wasn't quite right, because he wouldn't say no if he didn't mean it.
So he did keep talking?
Yeah, there was a few things he had to say, a few things like that, but that private.
Was he in pain?
Again, that's up to me. Only me, I'm afraid.
Rodger's death is still the subject of a coroner's inquiry in Perth. At this stage, it's known he died of internal injuries. Rodger left behind Bev, his wife of 7 months, and their young son. His former wife Annette and son Hayden. His mother Pauline, 2 sisters and a brother. The name Rodger Freeth will endure in motorsport. Not as great as Bruce McLaren or Denny Hulme perhaps, but a star who died in his prime, doing what he loved, doing what he started 21 years ago.
This is a classic photo.
It is. That's where he got the nickname Super Prog, and it's when you see where those knees and things are, it's pretty easy. But somebody.
Promoter Brian Lawrence knew Rodger, rode with him back in his earliest days of motorcycle racing. Back then, Rodger looked poised for a career on two wheels.
And there was probably nothing more spectacular in New Zealand motorcycle racing than Rodger Freeth on the charge.
In his 14-year career in motorcycle racing, he collected 14 national titles. But nothing was as sweet to him as beating the Aussies. He did it twice in Bathurst on a homemade bike.
And he was the brunt of the joke because he was this tall, skinny, bespectacled Kiwi guy, so he had that going against him for starters. And he arrived over there with a very limited budget team. I don't even think they stayed in the motel, they were that short of money. And they had this motorcycle that was made in Auckland. Well, that was a huge joke anyway.
What you'll need is an 18 mil. 18 mil.
Because the Aussies just didn't have anything like that. They had factory-prepared bikes, they had big budgets, they had two riders for a 500-kilometre race, and the 4 days they were there, they had a lot of problems getting it all set up, but they just kept working away.
Yeah, no, wait a minute, we need a spacer out. Can I get a big screwdriver there?
At around about sort of 4:30 on the Sunday afternoon when he's standing in the middle of the podium, he really didn't have to say much to the Australians.
He had gone as far as he could in motorcycle racing. The new challenge would be rally cars. As co-driver, his job was to direct the driver through every tiny detail of the route.
Left 4 or 5 off camber, don't cut loose.
Dictating from carefully crafted notes in a language he devised himself.
Maybe a jump.
Where the difference between a good co-driver and a world-class co-driver comes is in his anticipation of how to read the pace notes. And that's where he was very good. He always needs to be thinking ahead, never ever letting his guard drop, because then otherwise the notes become late. I find out late, therefore I haven't got the car set up properly, therefore we drove slower.
Did you trust him absolutely?
In the rallies, when he was reading the notes, yes.
Left 2, 3, junction.
Just went flat stick until he told me what else to do. Whatever the co-driver says, then you go for it.
So you were completely compatible?
And the whole time we worked together, we never actually had an argument or a crossword. We might disagree on things, but that was a professional disagreement. Never an argument or got sick of his company or anything like that. It was never once. And that's why I liked working with him, because you always knew that he was putting his best foot forward.
He was a gawky 15-year-old when he set out on his first rally of New Zealand on a bicycle, 4,000 kilometres in 3 weeks. His mother, Pauline, had no idea he would go so far, but he was no average kid. She knew he'd cope in any conditions.
Well, it seemed to me almost like a working holiday, because as he went on the bike ride, he seemed to have stopped at every place of interest. He's gone up, he's studied it, he's taken technical notes, he talks about it in his diary. He's also kept a running kilometre thing. To me, this is Rodger's first circuit.
It has only been since Rodger's death that his diary of the trip has been found, and Pauline has a copy of it.
Christmas Day, no Christmas dinner, but he'd biked 70 miles, Rog. It wasn't an easy ride, and this particular day he'd broken 4 spikes, lost chain 5 times, and he had a buckled wheel. It was the first time that I had seen it, and I thought, well, this is Rog, the open road ahead, just keeping going. It was actually so typical of him.
It shows great independence, this diary.
It shows amazing self-reliance. The striking part is the fact that he never seems to look back. He doesn't worry. He's sitting in this thunderstorm, and he's written in his diary that he estimates the noise as 120 decibels, and he's glad that everyone is gone, but he just loved it. He writes fantastic.
Born in Picton, Rodger and his family moved to Auckland after his father died. At Papakura High, the brilliant young mind was emerging. Rodger sailed through maths and science exams, skipped a form. He became dux. At 16, he made headlines in the local paper, the boy who built his own computer.
You encouraged him to learn and discover things.
There were books always in the house. Understanding Science was one of the magazines that we subscribed to, and things were always being built. Huge Meccano sets and pieces there, and there were always things being built by the children.
At university, Rodger again fast-tracked his studies, skipping a master's degree to pursue his PhD
Doctorate thesis.
when his racing schedule would allow.
It certainly isn't insignificant, as you can see. It's over 400 pages.
6 years of research went into Rodger's study on the changing intensity of stars. It's a paper that's been recognised worldwide.
A very unusual field. For us in astrophysics, he was the first person in the University of Auckland who, in fact, carried out experimental work in this particular field.
How bright was he?
His academic achievements are beyond question. There's no question. His examiners for his doctorate thesis were just carried away with the quality of the work. He was interested not just as an observer. He was interested in finding out why things happened.
His PhD completed, hundreds of Auckland students would be lectured by Dr Freeth, motorcycle champion. He loved academia, but when there was no full-time job for him, he left it for the racetrack.
Left 4-5.
He took his skills with him.
What he did was he worked through problems logically, and to him all problems were solvable as long as you had the time, and you could work your way through a problem until you got an answer. He couldn't accept mistakes, like especially with his adding and subtracting and things like that, because that was his life, maths and mathematics and physics and things like that. And his theory was we're only human, so it is possible, so you keep checking and make sure it's right and checking.
Was it ever difficult to work with such a perfectionist?
No, I can't abide half a job. The person, whoever was with me, I want the best person I can have, and if he's obsessive or downright stubborn about getting it right, that's fine by me.
But it didn't end with work. The compulsive Rodger Freeth was known to party hard too. His favourite companion, Jack Daniels.
Just fun stuff, you know, really. I often joke to him and said, if you've got a switch in the back of your head, that one's for work and one's for play, and he just used to flick it over whenever he was, whichever mode he was in.
In February, he switched to an Indy car for a race where time was his only rival. It was his land speed record attempt on a course that daunted his peers. Clocking 314 kilometres an hour, he became the fastest man in New Zealand.
Weren't you worried about him?
I didn't worry about him. I had watched him on the motorbike and seen him crash, and I thought, well, Rog, I'm not going to look at you anymore because I don't think it's doing you any good. I didn't want Rodger to have the restriction of a mother who sat at home and worried, and he knew that she was doing that. He needed a free mind.
Did you ever talk about the possibility of a serious accident?
Very little. We didn't think about it very much. You know that risk when you get in the car, isn't it? He's talking about it.
It was success that drove them, the glory that came with wins like these, the taste of invincibility. Rodger was named Motorsports Sportsperson of the Year just 2 months ago. It was his highest honour.
People right through the whole time I was at university used to say to me, you know, why do you go motor racing? I mean, you're supposed to be in here lecturing the students and trying to teach them where they can fit into society and how they can be useful to everyone else out there. And to be quite honest, I used to spend an awful lot of time trying to think up reasons why I went motor racing. And Peter tonight has just made me proud to be able to say to somebody, I go motor racing because I really love the thrill and the adrenaline and the buzz of going fast.
Was there some highlight of his life, some special memory that you have?
I felt that Rodger fulfilled his life and packed more into it than most people pack into double the time. The overriding consolation that stays with me is that Rodger was his own free spirit.
I suppose Rally of Indonesia, winning Rally of Indonesia was, I think he was just every bit as happy as I was that we'd won an international event, probably the best win we'd had of any event. I'll remember that for a long time. That was a pretty special moment.
Friends and supporters of Rodger have set up the Freeth Family Trust to assist in the education of his two sons. Donations can be made to the Bank of New Zealand.